Hey everybody, how you doing? I'm back again. I got some requests to do the rest of the Beatles. I just done a Paul McCartney solo top 25, and I'm going to do one for John, one for George, and one for Ringo. I'm going to start with George Harrison. Now, of course, George doesn't have as many albums as Paul. None of the other Beatles do. With Ringo coming up second as far as having the biggest quantity of albums. So I'm going to do a 10. The top 10 or 10 least to best, if you like. Just like with the last video I did for Paul, there's certain albums I'm going to leave out. I'm not going to include the live album like Concert for Bangladesh. And I'm not going to have the Traveling Wilburys, 2 albums in here. And also the earlier albums like Electronic Sounds and also Wonderwall. To be honest with you, I've never heard either one. You know, some collector I am, right? Some fan. I have these albums and I've never played Wonderwall. Can you believe it? So I might have to do this over again some other time. But for now, I'm gonna do the regular proper studio albums, and it just happened to be 10 of them. So that kind of fits in perfectly to do a 10 rather than a top 11 or 12. All right, we're gonna start with the album that I picked as the least of George Harrison's studio albums. That's number 10, and that's going to be this one here, Extra Texture. Far and away to me the least of George's albums. I did a review on this where I kind of explained why. If you want to check that out, go back in my files. Really tired, lackluster, kind of sleepy album. Very weak tracks here, very boring. George's voice throughout the whole thing is terrible. It kind of whines and warbles all over the place. The only songs I really like off this album, Extra Texture, from 1975, by the way, would be the opening track, You. I like the second song, The Answers at the End, which I think is really a good song. And the third song, which is a top-notch song of George's catalog, This Guitar Can't Keep From Crying, which was a single. I believe it was a single, yeah. Anyway, and that's really it. And all the rest of the tracks, I could leave every single one of them. So if I'm going to play this album, I usually play the first 3 songs and then lift the needle off. So at number 10, bringing up the rear, my vote for George's least album, Extra Texture. Read all about it. Okay, now the 9th album, I feel a little bad putting this at number 9 in recent years, but I'll explain this to you. It's a 1982 release, Gone Troppo, which I have not yet reviewed properly. Now, this album, when it first came out, I really hated this album. I had this dead last for George. And these days I might be being unkind to it by putting it at number 9. Maybe it would go up to 8 or 7 if I rethink it, because in recent times I've given this more of a chance. I don't think it's his best stuff on here, but there's some stuff here that the more I get familiar with it over the decades, I have been a lot more forgiving of it. I'm starting to think it's not the worst thing from George. So I think I gave it some hard knocks over the years, and I'm ready to give it a fresh reevaluation. Okay, so I might do that at some point. I think it's better than it was in 1982. Let's put it that way. Okay, the next one is going to be the number 8 album. Number 8, I chose Dark Horse, and you know, it's really tough because the album that I have at number 8 and the one I'm going to show later at number 7, they could have been interchangeable. So I really couldn't think of the right order to put these in. This is a 1974 release. George's voice was, again, not in the best shape. It earned the nickname Dark Horse, H-O-A-R-S-E, because of the throat problems he was having. I like 3 or 4 songs off here, but it just doesn't have the quantity of songs that I like in order to make it a little higher up on the ranking. So I got this Dark Horse at number 8. Now the number 7th album, as I say, I didn't know where to really put this album because it's not a very good album at all. but it might be interchangeable with the Dark Horse album, I don't know. Number 7, I picked Somewhere in England, which is 1981, and this album went through a remix. I mean, George had a different cover in mind for this album originally, and he had a different track listing, and then the company, Warner Brothers, wanted him to change the songs, and some of them were remixed, and he got this mess afterwards, which there's some good tracks on it. I did a review of this one, but it's not consistent, it's not solid all the way through, but it falls somewhere around Somewhere in England falls somewhere around number 7. Okay. Now we're going to do number 6. This is George's last album, the last album released. Well, I also should mention I didn't include the album Early Takes, the album of demos. I didn't do that, didn't count that either. Anyway, this is the last proper studio album that was released a year after George passed away in 2002, and it's Brainwashed. So this is the last official record. I got it on vinyl recently, and it's a good album. I think we're getting into the really good albums now that have a lot of really good solid tracks on all the way through, and didn't know where else to put this. I got it here at number 6. I love the opening song, Any Road. I think Any Road's great. I didn't do a review of this album yet, so I'm going to really save it. I don't want to say too much. Any Road may be my first favorite song, the first song on the album. Now we're already into the top 5, okay? This is the top 5 George Harrison albums, and what was interesting is I had no problem thinking about what I wanted to be number 1 and what I wanted to be number 2. The problems were with 3, 4, and 5. I could have switched 3, 4, and 5 in any interchangeable way. I mean, it was really difficult to decide what goes where. After perusing the tracks and thinking what's my favorite, how many tracks do I like on one album versus another, I decided to start number 5 with the 1976 album called 33 1/3. It was named for that because the record spins at 33 1/3 revolutions, and that was also the age George was when he started the album, I guess. So, a lot of good tracks on here. Commercial album. It's got the hit Crackerbox Palace on it, which is really good. He made a nice promo film, George did, for that in 1976, and he was promoting this. He went on Saturday Night Live in New York to promote this album and the single, and also has this song on it, which was a hit, but I really don't like this song. So again, I haven't reviewed this album properly yet, so I'll get to that. So anyway, number 5 of the top 5. Now we're going to go to number 4, and this was really difficult. I didn't know whether to make this album number 4 or whether to make it number 3. It's really difficult. I really love this album. It's 1979's self-titled album, George Harrison. Really nice, tranquil, easy-going record all the way through. Love this album. It has a hit on it, well, it should have been a bigger hit, Blow Away, which was could have been a number 1, that song, or top 5 anyway. So this is number 4. It's the George Harrison album. Number 3, and again, this could have been a switch with 4 or a switch with. It was really difficult to put 3, 4, and 5 in order. But I went with Living in the Material World from 1973. A lot of spiritual songs on here. I think it works better for those of you out there that may be spiritual, which I am. So it helps me appreciate the album a lot more than some other people. But it's got good songs on here, regardless of whether you're, so inclined in that spiritual realm or what. So that's number 3. Now we got, you know what albums are left, right? 2 albums. Now the thing about number 1 and number 2 is, I really could have went either way and flip-flop with those two, because I think these are both top-notch albums. And here's what I picked for number 2. I went with Cloud 9, which I think is an excellent, excellent album. When this came out in 1987, it was definitely a comeback for George. His voice was in great shape. The material was there. The songs were fantastic. Jeff Lynne of ELO were produced. Eric Clapton plays some guitar on here. This is a great, great George album. And in many ways, this would easily be number 1 for me. I could easily put this at number 1. It was really difficult to decide whether this was going to be number 1 or number 2, but I decided to bow down to convention and typically and conventionally give All Things Must Pass, George's debut official studio solo album, 3-record set, number 1. I mean, you can't argue. It's hard to argue with it. I mean, it's got this song we're listening to live here, Isn't It a Pity? The studio version on here. What can I say? I haven't reviewed this album. I've been kind of avoiding it because I can't do it justice, I don't think. It's considered not only the best George Harrison album, but also considered the best of all the solo albums by some people. That's hard to say, but it's right up there. Maybe I'll do that someday. I'll do a top 10 Beatles solo album by all 4 and see where I put this thing. I'll tell you something, I've never played the Apple Jam. There's a jam record on here. I've never played it. In all my decades of being a Beatles fan, I've never played it. I'm just not interested in jamming. Maybe one day I'll put it in the background. But the regular proper songs on this album, they're great. They're great. And the production, a lot of people fault, Phil Spector overproduced and a lot of heavy wall of sound over it. I think that gives it its character and personality, actually. I mean, I'm not gonna like show my hand with this album yet. I'll talk about the songs individually when the day comes that I actually do the review for the album. But number 1, George Harrison's best, All Things Must Pass. And that's what I've got to say about George. I'm going to be following at some point with Ringo and John, so please watch those too and comment. Thanks.